I've been there. You see a cheap pair of binoculars on a rack for half the price, you think you're getting a bargain, and a week later you're squinting at a blurry horizon because the lenses just won't hold up in low light. That disappointment makes the whole hobby feel risky, especially when you're trying to decide whether to spend a little extra for something that actually delivers. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The ZEISS Conquest HDX 15x56 is positioned as that smarter purchase, promising brighter images, weatherproof performance, and a rugged feel that cheap alternatives can't match. The question is whether it lives up to that promise in everyday use, and if it's worth the premium for you. First off, the biggest hesitation most people have is the jump from a $50 starter pair to a $600 plus flagship. It feels like a gamble. You're putting a lot of money into optics you may only use a few times a year, birdwatching in early spring, a weekend hike, or a one-off game day. I tried to approach the Conquest HDX as a real-world tool, not a lab specimen. I took it on a 3-day backpacking trip in the Appalachians, used it at a local birding hotspot on a misty morning, and even tested it at a nighttime stargazing session with a small red flashlight for focusing. What matters most in those moments is how quickly you can get a clear picture, how the instrument handles changing weather, and whether the weight actually stays light enough for a day on the trail. The optics are the headline feature. ZEISS claims 90% light transmission, and in practice that translates into a noticeably brighter image even when the sun is low or the sky is overcast. On the ridge at sunrise, the forest canopy looked almost three-dimensional, the pine needles were distinct, and the distant ridgeline held its contrast without the typical washout you see with cheaper glass. That kind of light gain matters for birders who need to spot a flash of color in the distance, or hunters who rely on early morning visibility. The low-to-tech coating does its job too. I watched water droplets bead off the lenses during a sudden drizzle, and there was no fogging or smearing. For anyone who spends time outdoors where weather can flip from clear to rain in minutes, that coating is more than a nice-to-have, it's a practical safeguard against lost sightings. Ruggedness is another area where the Conquest HDX separates itself. The housing is made from magnesium alloy, which feels solid but still light enough that the binoculars sit comfortably on a belt loop without pulling the strap down. The full rubber armor adds grip, and after a tumble off a low rock on my hike, the outer shell showed no dents or cracks. That durability is a real plus if you're the type who packs gear in a backpack where it gets jostled. However, the weight is still higher than a typical 1042 pair, it's about 1.5 pounds. For a casual city dweller who only plans to use the binoculars a few times a year, that extra heft could feel unnecessary, especially if you're carrying it around a crowded festival or a museum. The focus system is where the engineering feels thoughtful. The wheel turns just 1.3 rotations from close to infinity, which means you can lock onto a moving subject with minimal hand movement. The diopter lock holds the focus for each eye, so you don't have to keep readjusting if one eye sees slightly differently. On the birding site, I could track a woodpecker hopping from branch to branch without constantly tweaking the focus. The wheel's smoothness made the experience feel almost effortless. The removable Eyecups are a small but handy feature. I swapped them out for the slimmer version when I was wearing a hat, and the eye relief stayed comfortable even with my glasses on. Where the Conquest HDX shows its limits is in the price-to ratio for certain hobbyists. If you're an occasional user who only watches sports once a month, the 15 magnification might be overkill, and the 56mm objective lenses add bulk that you'll never fully appreciate. The high magnification also means a narrower field of view, which can make it harder to locate fast-moving subjects unless you're already tracking them. In my experience, it shines when you have a target in mind, a distant bird, a mountain peak, or a distant sailboat, but it's less forgiving for scanning wide vistas. That's not a flaw in the optics, just a trade-off that buyers need to weigh. Another practical consideration is the removable filter insert, the FLI mentioned in the specs. It's intended for protective or specialty filters, but the package I received didn't include any, so you have to buy them separately if you want to use a polarizer or UV filter. That adds a small extra cost and a bit of a learning curve for folks who aren't used to swapping filters on binoculars. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of if you're looking for a truly plug-and-play experience. So who should?